Good morning, students. May the 4th be with you on this Monday morning as we start this week of education. So, we've got a bunch cooking this week. Our Research Friday podcast is this one. Where does creativity come from, and why do schools kill it off? This podcast will discuss research that's been done about creativity and also some studies that have been done on what it is that schools are doing that destroys creativity. Here's a spoiler: a lot of schools don't know what to do with creativity, and it's not because of the school itself, but because of kind of the system. And this podcast will explain it. For those of you who have been wondering, why are we always listening to these research podcasts? Let's make sure we understand. Research podcast, just like we were watching research episodes, and why it's called Research Fridays. Research, research, research. The whole purpose of this is to show you how to combine multiple sources into a discussion on a topic, which is what your research paper is going to be. As you've noticed in all the podcasts, each one of the orange highlighted links leads you to a different research study or a researcher that have studied a subject. And what this podcast does, just like what the episodes did that we used to watch in class, is it combines multiple sources, multiple opinions, multiple perspectives on one subject. And it's related to a research question. In this case, where does creativity come from? Is a research question. So when you get to do your paper, which we're going to talk a little bit more about next week as you start to put it together, because by now you should have your 10 sources. What you will be doing is the same thing. You will be bringing together what's called synthesizing sources with different perspectives into one paper. So let's take a look, speaking of research, your research project, at some of the things that are coming up this week. So, way back in February, your interview request letter was due. We've moved it from February to March, then from March now to May. So, let's go over this one more time to make sure that you know what it is. Remember the Broken Catwoman lesson? Let's review that. Your research interview request is what you wrote to whoever it is you wanted to interview that's an expert on your subject. Now, lots of different things have happened over the last few months. Obviously, we're not in school anymore, and a lot of things are closed down that we can have access to. This is the format. You remember the business letter format. Everything is aligned to the left, and it goes in this order. We probably can't go out and interview anybody at this point, especially if you haven't done that. So instead, what I'd like for you to do, if you haven't already done this, which you should have, and I know already at least one student did, if you haven't already done that, and again, this is the format and an example, and then here's a link with more information on how to write a business format letter. What I'd like for you to do, instead of maybe having an interview subject for your paper, which is what has always been the requirement in this project, so that way you can contact an expert, write a letter requesting to interview someone who is dealing with this pandemic, someone who is dealing with this crisis. It could be a hospital worker, it could be a grocery store worker, it could be your postman or postwoman, it could be anybody who is on the front lines of this crisis. What would you ask them? 3 questions. Even if you don't send that interview letter to anybody, write it. Because maybe one day when we're back to normal, you can take this letter to a hospital, to a police station, to a fire department station, to a grocery store, to a delivery driver, to any one of the either first responders or essential workers, and say, hey, I remember doing this project when I was in school, and I'm really thankful for what you all did. So I wrote you all this letter. And that's exactly what I'd like for you to do when it comes to the thank you letter. If you haven't interviewed somebody, and I know someone at least did, if you haven't interviewed somebody, write a business format thank you letter thanking them for their help during this crisis. And they don't necessarily have to help any of us specifically or individually, but a thank you letter that could be sent to anyone who's on the front line of this. Again, people who are working in hospitals, we have the stay-at-home order and they can't stay home. So many of my former students that keep in contact with me are working in the medical profession as pharmacists, as nurses, as doctors. I see the struggles that they're going through. A thank you letter makes a world of difference. Here's a link for how to write one. It's not much to it. You see? Pretty basic. But it should come from you. What are you thankful about that they're keeping up? We've seen a lot of people step up during this crisis and do things that they're called upon to do. Write them a thank you letter. Post it. I'll give you credit for doing it. If you interviewed anybody, I'll make it a bonus. What are their responses to your interview questions? A bonus means if you didn't interview anybody, it's not going to count against you. You're also going to get a puzzle this week. Here it is. As usual, if you have any questions, please ask me, and please hit like so that I know you saw this update. Last week, who was it that hit liked? Thank you, MD. Thank you, Angie. Thank you, Adrian. Thank you, Benjamin. Thank you, Brianna. Thank you, Cynthia. Thank you, Thais. Thank you, Christian. And thank you, Grace. Stay well. Stay safe. Stay healthy. Stay productive. And may the 4th be with you.